Well, greetings everybody. Well, I'm very pleased today to be interviewing Bishop Dewar, which is he's my first bishop. I've clocked up my first bishop on my channel, which I think is smashing, and that's going to surprise a lot of people because you know my views on most Anglican bishops. But we've got a bishop today is a right-wing bishop who claims a self-proclaimed right-wing bishop. So he must be the only one in the entire world, I would think, at the moment. But that's all good. And I just sort of set myself up just as a moment, so you know where I'm coming. Most people know where I'm coming from. I am a Christian, and I do live. I try to live in a really Christian manner, but I'm a lapsed Anglican because I just can't bear them anymore. I can't bear them. I can't bear them at all, and most people can't, which is why the churches are empty, and it's a terrible shame. But I'm going to run all this kind of stuff past Bishop Dewar, and he's going to give me the benefits of his wisdom, and so that's great. Well, so Guy, over to you. I don't mind what we kick off with. It's entirely up to you. But I think the buzzword of the day is Islamophobia. And I'd like you to just express your views, which I know are pretty well in line with mine, but that's neither here nor there. Take it away, if you will.
Well, thank you, Godfrey, and thank you for having me on to be interviewed with you. It is a pleasure and an honor to sit with you for this time. I think if we are relying on the benefits of my wisdom, this is going to be a very short interview indeed. But that said, my take on Islamophobia is quite unique. I've said it on multiple media outlets. I don't believe in Islamophobia, and I don't for several reasons. Firstly, Islamophobia is a media / political elite construct that they use to label something in order to really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not persecute, but malign us, that have any form of concern about the radical fundamentalist aspect of that religious system. Now, for me, it's real cut and dry, and it's as clear as the writing on the wall. You cannot have an irrational fear of a religion. Religion is a set of beliefs. It cannot harm you in any way. A religion is not going to attack you. What we should have is an irrational fear of violent, extremist, fundamentalist believers of any religion. And at the moment, given the number of extreme atrocities that are committed, which are overwhelmingly committed by Islamic fundamentalists, people's justification of having a fear of radical fundamentalist Islamist believers is perfectly justified. But you cannot categorize that as Islamophobia because it's not the religion that's attacking you, it is its adherents. There are Christian fundamentalists that are equally as violent and just as fruity and are just as dangerous to the people that they attack as the radical fundamentalist Islamists to the attacks that they commit. They just don't do it on the scale that Islam advocates for as a religious system. So I really think that Islamophobia has been overplayed. And the one thing that I try to make clear as often as possible is we have had this term Islamophobia rallied against us like it is a race issue or an ethnicity issue. Islam is not a race, it is a religion. It is not dependent on the believer's skin color, on their ethnicity, on their nationality. It is purely a religious belief, a religious system, a system that is theocratic in its makeup and desires to implement Sharia law all across the world to bring about a global caliphate. So I think people like you and I have been given a unique opportunity in the public forum to reshape the narrative about what Islamophobia actually is and to push forward the understanding that it is not a race thing. It is not an ethnicity thing. It is not a cultural thing. It's not a nationalism thing. This is a violent, extreme religion in the hands of fundamentalist believers within that religion, and we are right to be concerned about them, the interpretation of that religion, their practice of that religion, and what they intend to do using that, and must always remember that that boils down to the evil within men's hearts, not an irrational fear of a religious belief.
Well, that's exactly how I see it. My doctor is a Muslim. I have good friends that I was at college with who are Muslim, so I go and see in Oman and places like that. And so I certainly have no issue. And you're absolutely right on defining it in that way, in my view. And in fact, it's the way that my Muslim friends would define it. And I know my friends in Oman who are very senior people now, as we all get older, they've gone up the old tree faster than I've gone up my tree. But they've said, there are these fanatics, and they've all said the same thing. Why on earth do you let them in? We don't let them into Dubai. We don't let them into Oman. We don't let them into their area because they are dangerous and destabilizing. And this is basically, I suppose, why would you argue that that's why they've been trying to come up with a definition of Islamophobia, and of course that's really why they can't, isn't it, if you think about it? Because deep down they must agree with our view, otherwise they could have come up with a definition of Islamophobia. But of course it's not, as you rightly say, it's not based on the color of your skin or anything like that. So how can you have a fear of it if it's not couched in the way that you and I think an awful lot of people see it. A lot of people see it if they've had time to think about it. How do you see it developing from here?
I think the government's attempts to categorize Islamophobia is tantamount to a blasphemy law, and we haven't had blasphemy laws in the United Kingdom for well over 300 years. Now, I don't believe that it is because of legitimate attacks levied against the Islamic community, as we've heard, or this abuse that is levied against them, that is the driving force behind it. I genuinely believe that the current Labour Party, which is our current government, are so deeply entrenched with needing the Islamic vote and Islamic finances that they've received in the previous election campaign and support through the years, that now they're trying to pay back their debtors in a way. Any religion, my own included, yours included, both of us, any religion is not beyond criticism, and it is not a bad thing to raise questions about how we practice our religion, why we practice it the particular way, or question the motives behind certain things that are happening. And I just think that we have a socialist government that is trying that age-old experiment of socialism and Islam working hand in hand, which has been tried in the past and failed miserably, and using that to bring more controls over the people, especially in the area of controlling Islam, controlling criticism of Islam. We've seen it, yesterday. I did a report on Talk TV with Mark Dolan talking about the fact a Christian street preacher was arrested by the police for simply saying "God bless you" to a Muslim believer at a pro-Palestinian rally. And yet we've seen how many people turn out for these pro-Palestinian rallies crying Allahu Akbar, from the river to the sea, death to the Jews, and all manner of religious slurs and anti-Semitic tropes. Nothing's done about that because it's not, we don't complain in the same way. So I'm really skeptical about why this government is trying to define that. And it is beyond definition, because how do you define something you've made up to fit a narrative? And the one thing I would draw us back to is, we're talking about a particular side of, or a small group of people within the global Islamic community. And I looked into that. What does that mean? Well, statistically, apparently, between 15 and 25% of global Islamic believers want to see that kind of 7th century Sharia or theocratic Islam implemented across the world. When you think, well, 25%, that's not a significant percentage, is it? The 75% that would prefer not to, what we call moderate Muslims in this day and age. If it is the upper number in that scale, 25%, that's an estimated 385 to 500 million people worldwide that want to see Western civilization and our entire way of life eradicated, and Western civilians either subjugated or executed in the furthering of that religious belief. So we need to wake up to the reality of what's actually going on here and understand that right now we have a government that is fully complicit in furthering an anti-Great Britain, anti-Western civilization, anti-Christ agenda in the earth.
I wonder why, perhaps now sort of skipping on to the next thing that I'd like to get your opinion on, is why we seem to see the Anglican bishops, and it's not only the Anglican bishops, there seems to be a little bit of backsliding, if you will, from Catholic, the Catholic bishops and cardinals and so on and so forth. I mean, I am a guide, a professional guide at York Minster, for example. I don't do much these days. It was going to be a retirement hobby, if you will. Like, I started another business which keeps me going, so it hasn't quite worked out that way. But I mean, the Anglican Church, the hierarchy of the Anglican Church, don't seem to ever talk about what we're talking about now. Is, you know, basically. There are some Muslims who are fundamentalists, who are dangerous, and the great majority who aren't. But we don't seem to hear that. You only hear refugees welcome, and when they're talking about young men who are clearly economic migrants,
yeah.
And with very dubious characters. But you would expect, would you not, the 20 or so bishops that we have in the House of Lords standing up and saying, "What the hell are we doing?" But we don't seem to have this. They don't seem to say that.
There's a simple reason for that, and that is we now have a mix of the 26 bishops in the upper house, a combination of male and female, and in one way or another, all of them lack the testicular fortitude to actually speak the truth and call this situation for what it is. I've lost my concern about what people think about me. My concern is simply proclaiming the truth, because the scripture says, "For you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." And the truth that we have in this country is the Church of England and the Church in Wales are complicit in this whole degradation of Western society. That really came to the forefront 30 years ago. Now, you'll have to forgive me because I'm not apologizing for what I believe, but some people wouldn't understand that being a missionary bishop in the confessing Anglican Church, we are outside of communion with the See of Canterbury, but we are traditional Anglicans. We don't ordain females to the priesthood or the episcopacy. And with that ordination process 30 odd years ago began the final decline and descent of the morality and the integrity of the Church in England, the Church of England and the Church in Wales in the United Kingdom. And what we're seeing now is this liberality amongst clerics, where they're more concerned with public opinion than they are preaching the gospel. They're more concerned with trans agendas than promoting truth. And the result of that is, as we're seeing, the Church of England, the Church in Wales, is in the most rapid decline it's ever been. It now has the single biggest schism it's ever seen in the global Anglican Communion, with the appointment of Dame Sarah Mullally as the next Archbishop of Canterbury. And they've gone soft. There's no other way of saying it. They are cowardly. I'll give you an example from my own experience to kind of prove my point. On September the 13th of this year, I took to the stage once again at the Unite the Kingdom rally organized by Tommy Robinson in London. I am not afraid to take to that platform. And I have told many people, if Stand Up to Racism offered me a platform, I'd go there. My message won't change, just the audience does. But there were a significant number of clergy that wrote an open letter to the Times and to the Sunday Mirror, attacking people for, as they've said, co-opting the cross of Christ and taking symbolism and iconography of the Christian faith, and as was declared in that letter, and I paraphrase for the sake of understanding, perverting it. And how dare we do that? Like, since when has the cross of Christ been the exclusive territory of middle-class Church of England bishops? But not one of them had got into the streets and listened to those people professing their faith. Not one of them had actually attended the rally to hear what was being said, because they lacked the testicular fortitude to stand for truth and to actually listen to what people are concerned about. Now, the church has a unique position, because scripture advocates that we are to look after, to care for the strangers, the orphans, and the widows. But we must never do that at the expense of the nation state's own people, which right now is happening. Government are putting illegal immigrants into the UK into a higher category of prioritization than our own veterans, than our own homeless, than in Wales. 3 in 5 children are living beneath the poverty line, something that doesn't need to happen if we have good governance. Scripture also advocates that we are to be responsible for good governance. And it's a fine balance between what is acceptable in good governance and what is caring for the strangers, the orphans, and the widow, wherever that is feasible, not at the expense of our own people. The Church of England and the Church in Wales, with their agreement with these sanctuary state policies, would throw open the doors of our borders and let everybody in because we're looking after the strangers. We both know recently the Church of England has been involved and engulfed in the baptismal scandal, which Dame Sarah Mullally comes out just last week and says she fully supports baptizing immigrants, knowing that the majority of them are coming from Islamic countries, are fundamentalist believers that operate on the principle of taqiyya, where they can lie and say whatever is necessary to promote the furthering of their own religion, if it helps deceive people into welcoming them in. So the church is abdicating its moral responsibility. And because of that, it's given rise to the necessity for organizations like I'm a part of, the Confessing Anglican Church, other Anglican bodies, not just in the United Kingdom, but around the world, that are saying enough with the lies, enough with this perversion. We're going back to and sticking to the truth of Scripture, the truth of canon, and we are making a stand for Christianity, for the cross of Christ, for the risen Christ in this day, because anytime you have to change the canon of Scripture or canon law to fit your ideology, it is not the Scripture or the canon that is wrong. It is your ideology that is perverse. And that is something I genuinely believe we must stamp out in the Anglican Church and across the church in this United Kingdom. Because if we don't return to Christ and the truth of what he preached, the soul of this nation will be lost to all manner of false doctrine and false ideology.
Would you consider perhaps that we are at a sort of mutated point, perhaps that saw the rise of Methodism, where people said we're fed up with this, if you like, the wishy-washy middle classes, and my theory is that there is almost nobody more stupid than the English middle class as a genre, although I might argue I am one. That people, my regimental padre, 20 years ago, left the Church of England to join the Greek Orthodox Church, because he just couldn't cope with the abandonment of the fundamental principles, as it were, of Anglicanism. So I think people are looking, and you probably know more about this than me, people are looking for something, which is why we're seeing the growth of rather bizarre things, are we not? We're seeing the growth of this sort of climate thing, which is turned into a religion. The sort of the climate. People, I think, need humans need something to fill the void.
Yep.
And I would argue that a rebirth of the Anglican Church in the right way would provide that for people who are looking for that kind of satisfaction. And when you see people like the current Archbishop, and let's be brutally frank here, I would argue that the church hierarchy, with one or two exceptions, have been agnostic, which is why they have no drive, as it were, in their religious fervor, because they're not really believers. Now, that's okay. I'm not suggesting you should be. You really shouldn't be a bishop or an archbishop or a senior cleric if you deep down really have lost your faith. And I believe that's what they've done. Or am I wrong?
No, I would agree to that. In fact, I would probably go beyond that. I think there are several clergy, high-ranking clergy in the Church of England and certainly in the Church of Wales, where I would question they even believed in God in the first place. And they come from that era where being a priest in the Anglican Church was a social status thing. And welcomed amongst the middle class. You know, I can't comment on middle class England, being Welsh myself. But, you know, we're not in that. And there are people that are still hanging on to that antiquated belief. The only problem is that when that belief came about, those men that were the priests and the bishops were devout believers and entered vocational ministry for the furthering of the mission of the church and the preaching of the gospel amongst the parishional system here in the United Kingdom. Where we've now deviated from is the preponderance of believers that I encounter are what I would consider outside of the church and looking for what they term muscular or militant Christianity. It was something that Tom Cheshire of Sky News kind of berated me for in the interview about, you know, I'm at the forefront of leading this Christian nationalism drive, which is completely news to me because I never believed in Christian nationalism. I believe Britain's a Christian nation, and that's a very different thing. But then kind of mocking this whole new militant Christianity, as he described it. For 2 millennia, we've been called the church militant. Militancy in the church is not a new thing, sadly, because of the watering down of doctrine, because of the watering down of teaching, because political correctness became more of a driving force than actually preaching the gospel, where bishops would rather spend more time in gossip than studying the gospels. We've seen this decline into what I consider depravity, for want of a better word, within the Anglican Church across the United Kingdom. And suddenly, as people are leaving the Church of England, leaving the Church in Wales, which has seen the biggest decline in its entire history, just looking at the Church of Wales, it's gone from 110,000 regular Sunday worshippers to less than 20,000 in a space of about 20 years. That's a significant departure. But it's because of this weak-willed, weak-livered leadership that is pushing through all of their cultural agendas and social agendas rather than adhering to the truth of Scripture and doctrine, that people are leaving the church and either going to this more militant orthodoxy or, as we've seen in the United Kingdom, the rise of evangelicalism, Pentecostalism, charismaticism, because that is orthodox in its belief, whether people like it or not. They might not like the way that the worship is practiced, but the belief is an absolute adherence to the truth and tradition of Scripture, not the abandonment for the sake of cultural acceptance. And because of that, the Anglican Church across the United Kingdom is in rapid decline. Even now, where once the Methodist Church was boosted by those numbers of people that left Anglicanism but couldn't quite make that full transition to evangelicalism, now because of the Methodist Church going even further into its cultural ideology than the Anglican Church, even the Methodist Church is, for want of a better expression, one foot in the grave and the other one slipping.
Yes, it's only when you visit, I'm sure that, as we mentioned before we came on air, we have an annual holiday in Wales. all the time. We like to do coastal paths and stuff, and I particularly like it because some of the towns in Wales I particularly like, because it's like stepping back into the 1950s. And all the good bits of the ethos of politeness in shops and queues and parking and people and so on and so forth, which I particularly like, which seems to be much more alive in Wales. I'm in Yorkshire, and it's here too. But of course, we did have, if you go back to that time, the mid 1800s, perhaps, where who went into the church and who went into the army. I mean, both the church and the army in the hierarchy of the middle class system, as it will, the upper middle class system, was the fool of the family. So it wasn't a question of faith, was it, really, in those days, that went in to the church. It was because it was a profession. Being a cleric was a profession, a respected profession, as it were, which was part of that community. And my old regimental padre, excuse me, he said the problem that we've got these bishops, these archbishops and bishops in the Anglican Church, is that if you check their CVs, and he told me this 25 years ago, if you check their CVs, they've never been a parish priest. They've always sat on committees, and they've always been, theocrats, or whatever you'd like to call them. And this is the problem, that they don't really have a calling. They're maneuvering themselves up. And here's an interesting thing: they would in a very big, either in the civil service or a very big organization, maybe like a huge oil company.
Yeah.
Oh, a huge oil company. Who produced the last archbishop? It was an oil company. He's a corporate strategist, not a priest, never been a priest. And of course, that brings me on to the next thing. And of course, I held the Queen's Commission, and I'm a monarchist and have always been a monarchist. But I stare now at the House of Windsor, and I've run out of puff. I cannot continue to support them. And it seems to me that the one man that should be standing up, perhaps, for the Anglican Church is the leader of it. And I've never heard him express any serious adherence to faith at all. And I'm just wondering whether we need a new leader, or we need to change the whole system.
Well, it's interesting you raise that point. Purely because of the relationship that he claimed to have with Justin Welby, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, a man that was a bishop for just over a year before he was appointed as the head of the Global Anglican Communion. And his first message to all of the bishops as the Archbishop of Canterbury was not a great theological exhortation. It was the expression that they all needed to take some time off to get a master's in business administration, because at the end of the day, we're nothing but administrators now. I completely disagree with that. And I had a conversation with our now sovereign, King Charles. I'm like yourself, Godfrey. I'm an absolute monarchist. Strange to hear a Welshman say that, but I am. I believe in the necessity of the monarchy, and I believe that it is an institution that has held this country together very well. I believe the last true monarch we had was our late sovereign lady, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And she was also the last true supreme governor of the Church of England, because her son has done an absolutely abysmal job. And I make no bones for saying that. I don't sugarcoat anything. My name isn't Willy Wonka. And I think that King Charles is an absolute dire supreme governor of the Church of England, because of his what should we say, interesting beliefs, and the fact that he is putting what seems to be the agenda of another religion above the one in which he is supposed to be, descendant of the lineage of Henry VIII, as defender of the faith. I'm just not quite sure which faith it is anymore. So I think that what this king needs is men of intestinal fortitude in his ear to say, you are the supreme governor of the Church of England, and you need to stand up like your mother stood up in defense of the church and in defense of her faith. And if you don't, we are in a constitutional crisis, because for all intents and purposes, you should be removed as the supreme governor of the Church of England. And it's a unique position that we find ourselves in with global Anglicanism, because, of course, there are a lot of people that no longer see King Charles because of his expression of faith in, or his expression of support for other religions as the Supreme Governor of the Church of England. And most of the global Anglican communion no longer recognizes the Archbishop of Canterbury as the spiritual head of the Anglican communion worldwide, because of the actions of Justin Welby and now the decision to appoint Dame Sarah Mullally, which has caused a global schism in Anglicanism, especially amongst the traditional Anglicans that don't recognize female priests or female bishops. So right now we're in a transition where potentially the entire Anglican Church either needs a complete change of headship, or we need a mass revival of truth and tradition in Anglicanism, and the appointment of an Archbishop of Canterbury with some intestinal or testicular fortitude, as I like to say, because they tell me I can't say balls on it, and and one that will actually call the king to account as the Supreme Governor, and basically say, as we would say in Wales, "Oi, you, Butty, sort it out." Otherwise, we're in a very dangerous position, because his heir has already professed that he doesn't believe in God, has no Christian faith, and doesn't intend to be the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, which is going to cause a constitutional crisis when that comes about, if that situation doesn't change.
Oh, well, I agree with absolutely everything you said. I'd say I'm a monarchist, a staunch monarchist, come from a long family. My father, my grandfather, all held the Queen's Commission or the King's Commission. It is the House of Windsor in which I have lost faith, not the concept of monarchy. But it is a problem, and it's not just grasshoppering again. If I may, it's not just Anglicanism, the Catholic faith. It seems that we have now another pope. He also seems to be a little bit wishy-washy, if I can express it that way. I don't know how to express it any better.
I think there's this everybody's too concerned with all of the political correctness and appealing to the crowd and satisfying the masses, speaking for popular opinion. My only concern with that is, when I look at the Gospels, it was popular opinion that put Christ on the cross of Calvary in the first place. My jury is out, so to speak, on the current Pope. I was a fierce and vocal critic of his predecessor, and yet Pope Benedict XVI of my lifetime, I'm on my fourth Pope in my lifetime, Pope Benedict XVI was, for all intents and purposes, my Pope. Not being Catholic, but he was the one that I found myself endearing to the most, largely because I'm academic more than I was, I would like to admit in public. So his theological mind is something that fascinates me. In fact, that entire shelf there behind me is littered with his writings as both Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope Benedict XVI, which is a strange thing to say as an Anglican. But I think we've yet to see. The current Pope has a lot of mess to clean up, particularly in the final years of Pope Francis's papacy, where he expressed an awful lot of strange beliefs, wrote some very strange letters to the bishops, took a very strange doctrinal stance, one that has fractured the church in Rome and around the world. And I think it's going to be a balancing act for this Pope. I'll be honest with you, I would not like to have been the successor to Francis, because you've got a whole lot of mess to clean up and then try to find the way forward. Now, when it comes to kind of the ecclesiastical hierarchy of Rome, Pope Leo, as cardinal, was on the more liberal side. But I know two of the liberal cardinals that actually were in the conclave that voted to elect Francis, and it didn't take but 5 or 6 years for them to be regretting their vote, because he went so far to that liberal side and I'm not saying anything about the fact that Jesuits have a very warped belief system anyway, even though that might be true, but you didn't hear it from me. but, but I think that I think time will tell.
I think history would probably vindicate that view, but still.
Well, you know, we're all entitled to our opinions. But every Jesuit I've met has very strange views and very strange beliefs outside of the scriptures, and certainly their interpretation of it. But I think the next 5 or 6 years are going to be key in how Leo XIV's papacy is going to be defined. And I think his election was a lot more strategic than people realize. The largest financial base of Catholicism is North America. Under Francis, that was waning immensely. The number of Catholic believers that had stopped attending Mass regularly because of Francis' attack on the Trump administration and certain policies of the Republican Party, that was not a wise move. And what most people don't know is that the day after Leo XIV was announced as the successor to Peter and the Vicar of Christ, 150,000 men joined the Catholic Church in North America. So I think the next 4 or 5 years are going to be the making of where we see his papacy ultimately going. And I think we should all remember, papacies are an interesting thing. It's like a marathon. It's not how it starts, it's how it ends that really matters.
I think it would be a good idea to leave it there, because I think we've covered, it's been quite a broad cover in quite a short period of time, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope my subscribers with an interest in this subject will enjoy as well. I would like to come back to you perhaps in the new year to continue the discussion when I've and please, if you're watching this interview, my subscribers, please give me your views. I'm interested in your views. I look at your views and then I can collate them. And then when I get back in the new year, hopefully as I can, with Bishop Dewar, we can think about it. I'll make them available to him so he can have a bit of a think about them as well, because this is no longer a bit of a sideline. This is no longer something academic of maybe academic interest. This is coming up your path. This problem with, we are a Christian country. We are, broadly speaking, an Anglican country, although that doesn't mean everybody goes to church, because they don't. But broadly speaking, Christian values. And we all have our interpretation of Christian values. But it's not difficult. It's not difficult. And I would sum it up a little bit. I know this probably annoy the bishop, but I would sum it up as a little bit of do as you would be done by. And I think if we all go about our daily lives saying do as you would be done by, we'd be in a much better place. But we have huge constitutional issues coming up the path. And I think it's going to be very useful if everybody starts thinking about them now, not when they're dumped on your lap by criminals like Keir Starmer and the rest of them. But once again, thank you very much, Bishop. I'm very, very grateful to you. And we'll get back together if you will in the new year, and we'll talk about developing some people's thoughts on this. I'm quite sure quite a lot of people will have input, good or bad. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me on, and I greatly look forward to expanding and continuing the conversation. And let me know when you're in Wales, and I'll buy you dinner.
Oh, marvellous. Thank you. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.